Hi everyone, my name is Kara Biddlecombe. I'm with the Public Health Division at the Oregon Health Authority. And today we're going to talk about how to invoice OHA for your isolation and quarantine costs. So in this video, we're going to talk about what expenses for isolation and quarantine are eligible for reimbursement, how to fill out your isolation and quarantine reimbursement invoice form, how to submit it, and what happens after you submit your paperwork for reimbursement. So with that, I'm going to open up the reimbursement form itself. And this is available on our website. I'll show you where to find it. Essentially, this is where we're going to want you to track all of your expenses for somebody who has been in isolation or in quarantine so that you can get reimbursed for those direct costs. So we will want to include the grant agreement number and your organization name with the invoice. You can send that to us by email, would be preferred, at community.covid19@dhsoha.state.or.us. If email is not preferable for you, you're welcome to either fax that over to us or do a mailed in option. I will say, and we'll talk a little bit about this with receipts, if you are, you should be careful not to include any personal identifying information for somebody who's been in isolation or quarantine. We would prefer that you use a random person ID number and that you are careful in your receipts to mark out any individual name, either with black marker or white out, or cut or cover that up as you prepare your invoice. We'd like to get these invoices from you approximately monthly, but no less than quarterly, and your last invoice will be due to OHA by January 31st, 2021. I will also note that for every time that your CBO submits an invoice, it will generate a grant agreement amendment, which will need to get sent to you for signature before we can pay the invoice. So it might be something that your organization wants to think about lumping together just to reduce paperwork for both ends. And particularly for those of you for whom this is your first invoice, we're really hoping to add that reimbursement onto your second quarter's funding. So here on the first page are the instructions, and you'll see that what we're looking for is a total amount for wraparound services by category of service, and then supporting documentation, so who you purchased that isolation or quarantine support from, how much you paid, dates of purchase. And just a reminder that the items that can be covered by your isolation and quarantine wraparound services for reimbursement are housing, so that can include both rental or mortgage payments for the period that somebody is in isolation or quarantine, or hotel or motel, cleaning services, food, so that could be food delivery, groceries, and so forth, transportation, communications, like pay-as-you-go cell phone to help with contact with local public health, or the CBO for daily symptom monitoring, healthcare and self-monitoring supplies that are not covered by insurance, and then child care costs. And so there's an explainer here about the types of things that are not covered through isolation and quarantine reimbursement. And again, the reimbursement is just for the period of time in which the individual you're working with is either in isolation or quarantine. And we will pay those costs, for example, if somebody is in isolation for a longer period of time, up to 30 days. So I'm going to go over to our next tab, which is the summary sample. And again, here is where you would add your organization's address, your tax ID, what period you're billing us for, and then your grant agreement number for your OHA COVID-19 grant. And this is a summary. So let's say I had 3 individuals and I paid hotel and it was $1,000 per individual. I would sum that up here, and you'll see it totals at the bottom. Those 3 individuals, the cleaning services were $500, food was $600, and so forth. So you'd be adding that total in on this column. And then you go to the wraparound services detail. And this is where you provide a little bit more explanation behind those costs. So number of people served, I had 3,000 here, 3 people, and let's say it was 28 days that I paid for. So breaking that down a little bit further. And then in the section below, it's who the vendor is, and this should match up with your receipts that will go to back up your documentation. So let's say I paid for a hotel, we paid for 2 days, this was the amount, or 3 days, and this was the amount that we paid. What we're looking for here is on your receipts and with this detail to match up the person that you served. So here we're just looking for a random number. So if I had person 23, person 65, and so forth, this will allow us to know that for person 23, we had housing and transportation covered. Another question that we've gotten is whether these invoices can carry over from month to month. Let's say person 23 was in isolation on September 30th, and their isolation continued into the month of October. You could just carry the same person ID over for that individual. It doesn't have to be consistent or restart on a new invoice. I think the last thing that I want to mention for you here again is that we're looking for receipts to go along with each of these items that you're outlining in the description. We do not want to see any names or other identifying information on your receipt backup. So for example, if you have a hotel receipt that has the individual's name who was in the room, we want you to remove that information before sending it to us. And just use the person ID to match back up. With that, just a reminder to please reach out to your community engagement coordinators if you have any questions or have any concerns about what you can invoice us for. And then again, we're looking for your invoices to be emailed to us here. You can also fax or send by regular mail as well. Thank you so much and have a great day.